Welcome back to Fantasy Football RPG, your go-to source for all things fantasy football. Join us for expert analysis, top strategies, and the latest insights to help you dominate your league. Let's level up your game and dive into the nitty-gritty. Without further ado, let's get the action.
Welcome back to another episode of Fantasy Football RPG. If you clicked on this, it is either because you are really sad about Chris Olave or you are trying to figure out if you should buy back into him with all of the concussion problems. Listen, before we get started, I'm joined by David. David, you look hot like a lumberjack. Evan, you look beautiful as always. What the hell are we doing with Chris Olave in fantasy football right now? We're talking Dynasty specifically, so he's valued as the wide receiver 25 by our friends over at Fantasy Calc. He's a wide receiver 48 in points per game, so even when he was playing, wasn't really that great. Wide receiver 75 on the season and tanking quickly. Evan, what are we doing with Chris Olave?
Oh, man. Chris Olave had so much promise going into the season. And then Rashid Shaheed came in and said, hold my beer. Derek Carr got hurt. A lot of things happened in the Saints offense. The offensive line was still bad as expected. We're talking about a team that's bottom half in most offensive line stats. Never great for your quarterback. And then Chris Olave got hurt. So if you're still a believer and you remember the Ohio State glory days for Chris Olave and understanding what he can do and what he can be, knowing that he is a threat, and if the Saints offense actually had an offensive line to be able to give Derek Carr some, time, and Shaheed would have stayed healthy, and Chris Olave would have stayed healthy, and Taysom Hill now would have stayed healthy, this could actually be an offense to come. So there's hope.
Okay. I'm going to bring up a couple of concerns. I think this is Chris Olave's 7th concussion that is on the books. They just don't happen in primetime games. Like, people don't know about them. That's going all the way back to college, so we're including a couple in there. Listen, before we continue, if you guys have made it this far, I have to ask you, please like, subscribe, leave a comment about David's cool flannel or about my hat. Head over to 828 Golf, sponsor of the show. Not actually, but if you're listening, hi 828 Golf. Dude, he has all of these problems going on, and then let's talk about the Saints' overall environment. Like, they're approximately $8 bajillion over the cap. They are relying on a 35-year-old Taysom Hill to recover from his injuries so that they have a wild card in their offense. They just extended Alvin Kamara. They're stuck with Derek Carr, or they can move on from Derek Carr into one of the weakest quarterback classes that we have seen in the past 3 years. It's up there with 2022. I think it's a little better, but it's pretty rough. Bottom 2 in the last 10 years. So, David, with all of that in mind, here are a couple of names around Chris Olave. Just tell me which one you'd prefer. Chris Olave or Devonta Smith?
Devonta Smith.
Chris Olave or Terry McLaurin?
Terry McLaurin.
DJ Moore?
DJ Moore.
Waddle?
This is where it gets tough. I'd probably lean Waddle just because Tyreek Hill's getting old, but it's a tough one there.
Cooper Kupp?
I'd go Olave there.
Okay. It sounds to me like you want the proven points or the upside without, the giant lingering injury question mark.
Right. So for me, Olave is obviously, the concussions are legit. It's a real worry. But I'm also remembering what happened with Brandon Cooks all those years ago. There was a stretch where that guy just every time someone breathed on him, he had a concussion. Mm-hmm. And he, eventually walked it off. Had a few good years. Age caught up to him, but that's inevitable. That happens to everyone. And me personally, I sold Cooks everywhere I had him back then. I lost out on a lot of points because I overreacted to injuries, and I don't want to do that again. Chris Olave is a really good football player. Being with Derek Carr, not my favorite thing in the world, but hey, he's clearly not a fan of Carr. Olave's brother was on Twitter basically demanding a trade. So if something happens there, if the Saints do decide to blow it up, pretty much anywhere I'd say is better than New Orleans. Obviously there are worse quarterbacks out there than Derek Carr, but nobody throws a hospital ball better than Carr. He's probably the worst in the league at protecting his receivers. So literally any of the other 32 teams, Olave probably has a better chance of staying healthy.
Lovely. One more thing that I want to bring up about the environment in New Orleans, because I think all of us agree we want him out of there, like free Chris Olave, let him go to a real offense. Clint Kubiak is not sticking around in New Orleans. Like, people saw what that offense can be. They saw how exciting it can be. Like, if they don't promote him, like, my guy is gone. So something to watch. Maybe the system goes back to being sad. Evan, Chris Olave, or a 2025 playoff first?
Playoff first.
It's concerning that you picked that, and also concerning that you had to think about it that long, because if you asked this 3 months ago, people would have laughed you off the show. Talk about it.
I love me some running backs, honestly. We know the switch right now in the value of wide receivers. We know the wide receivers that have been coming into the league, and there really haven't been many running backs. This is a potential running back class to be able to replenish that. So I'll take my shot on the late first and just get out of Chris Olave, who I love. He's the intended air yard king. That's one of my favorite things. The intended air yards with Derek Carr. Don't worry that they're uncatchable balls. They're intended for him. And chucking the ball downfield. The defense is tail spinning, to say the least.
Falling apart quickly.
So if that continues and they continue to realize, scoring points puts fans in seats and keeps people entertained, and having shootout games is just what the NFL wants these days, then they're probably going to end up spending their money on the offense, which means they're not spending it on the defense, which means there should be a lot more passing that's going to occur.
I do agree that there will be more passing, but every time there's another pass from Derek Carr, it's another hospital ball, and we're a little worried. David, would you do a 25 playoff first?
I'd probably roll with Olave just because I'm more of a guy that running backs frighten me, just because so much of it's dependent on draft capital, and maybe Saquon and Derrick Henry having the years they're having will get teams to invest more in running backs. But I'm personally of the opinion that those guys are outliers. They are great cherries on top of already great teams. If you're trying to build with the running back first, you'll get the 2023 Titans or the 2023 Giants. Saquon and Derrick Henry are phenomenal players. In terms of raw talent, no positional value included, they're probably the top 10, 15 guys in the league. But positional value still exists. I think these running backs probably aren't going to go off the board as high as you'd want to. Like the elite ones will. Ashton Genty, he's going early, but everyone else, I'm really not that sure about them getting the draft capital I want. I'd rather go with Olave, who I know can play well in the NFL, although his brain might be soup.
I think we're going to have to bring you on for our running back preview. We've already gone through the top 10 wide receivers, so if you guys listen to this, go hop over, check that out after this. But, Evan, you raised an eyebrow when you said the rest of them aren't going to get draft capital that we think. I will also take the 2025 first, because I think Genty's getting the draft capital, Omarion Hampton's getting the draft capital, Caleb Johnson's getting the draft capital. Both the Ohio States are probably day 2 running backs. You're talking about 5 guys that we're already penciling in as top, I would probably say top 64 picks, if not top 80. So there's a lot that we're fired up about.
Yeah, I'm just afraid they're all going to cannibalize each other. I haven't done a full scout on the running back, so I take this with a grain of salt, but I don't think if Jonathan Brooks was coming out in this class, he would have been a second-round pick, because everyone says, well, why would I draft him so early when I could just, get any of these other guys 1 round later? And I think that's going to just keep adding it up. There's not much of a demand for what should be an excess supply. So I could see a lot of these guys, obviously Genty's not included in this, but I could see a lot of the other ones going later than everyone thinks.
Very fair. Let's not completely devolve into a running back discussion. Let's save that for a later show. If you guys have made it this far, like and subscribe. Evan, any closing thoughts on Chris Olave?
He plays for the Saints. The Saints are in a rough situation. Best of luck if you choose to keep Chris Olave for the dynasty value.
David wants you to buy him. Evan wants you to sell him. I'm sitting on the fence.
I want you to buy him for a pick. I don't want you to buy him for the players.
Very fair. Again, draft capital, we're willing to invest in the player. The rankings are probably just a little wrong for now. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Fantasy Football RPG Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at FFRPGPod and at FFMikeCash with a K. Don't let the goblins get you. We'll see you next week.